Rahavendra, the head of marketing for DHL Express Sub-Saharan Africa. Sumesh, good morning to you and welcome to AM News.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
Firstly, tell us more about the small and medium enterprise research that you've done on internationalization.
Yeah, so it's the internationalization study that Deutsche Post DHL, the global group, does every year. And essentially, without boring you with the details, what the study says is the more international activities that an SME is involved in, the higher their growth and the higher their chances of high performance. And, while we can get in the reasons, the main ones essentially boil down to making sure that you are present in more than one market, means you're hedging your risk in terms of what could happen domestically to that market. So if you were operating in South Africa and you had operations in Botswana, Namibia, Senegal, Nigeria, and Kenya, if one of these economies were to decline, if one of these economies were to tank, you have options in terms of other markets you're present in that could make up for the growth. And secondly, if you're operating domestically, you're only working on one market, you're working on a target set of population. And if you actually expand beyond your borders, look into other markets in Africa, outside Africa, you're essentially opening up your target market and you're opening your business to a whole new world.
Like my grandmother used to say, don't put all your eggs in one basket, spread them out. But why should South African SME businesses then consider cross-border trade opportunities, you think?
I mean, it's like I said, it's today, if you're a domestic company operating in South Africa, your growth is almost entirely dependent on how the South African market does. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if, given the current economic conditions and in future there is a decline, then your business is almost entirely going to be affected as part of that. Now, if you had operations outside of South Africa, if you had operations in Southern Africa, East Africa, West Africa, maybe the Indian Ocean Islands, you're essentially opening up yourself to diversifying your business and reaching a critical target mass and ensuring that if economic conditions in South Africa were to be adversely affected, then you have options outside of that.
Mm-hmm. Now, we have seen big telecom South African companies investing aggressively in Nigeria. What other unique opportunities are there for small players in that country?
Absolutely. I mean, look, Nigeria is a huge market for any African company to expand into. With 160, 170 million people, it is one of Africa's largest countries population-wise. And what that means is, as Nigeria is growing, as Nigeria is developing, there are more people who are increasingly earning higher income, which means their purchasing power is going up. And while their purchasing power is going up, they're going to want to access more goods and services. And that's a great opportunity for companies, not just in Nigeria, but outside of Nigeria, to ensure they're making use of that boom that's going to happen in Nigeria.
There's always a lot of rumor that it's very difficult to do business in Africa. But what are some of the possible challenges that companies would face, and how does one counter them, though?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like anywhere else in the world, yeah? I mean, we often get asked this question, Africa must be really challenging. Yes, it is challenging, yeah, but we prefer to talk about the opportunities. If you look at our challenges around the world, if you want to do business in Vietnam, as an example, it's almost imperative you speak Vietnamese. If you want to do business in China, you need to navigate through certain very complex.
So streaming live on YouTube as we speak right now, with the entire show available on our YouTube channel.
Of course, there are challenges in Africa, particularly around legislations, particularly around taxations, particularly around legal frameworks, around understanding the market, the nuances.
So streaming live on YouTube as we speak right now, with the entire show available.
If you want to expand your business into Sweden, Norway, Singapore, or Hong Kong today, it's fairly easy to find information, either online or through consultants, in terms of how exactly you would go setting up your business, what is the market like, what is the demographic like, etc. That kind of research doesn't really exist in Africa today, so that's a particular first step that any company needs to take. So there are challenges, but greater the challenge, greater the opportunity, we think.
But how does understanding diverse cultures come into play, or is there such a thing?
Absolutely there is. I mean, look, let me give you an example. If you're in a meeting, in West Africa, as an example, you might be interrupted in a very important business meeting by someone more senior. And what that means is they're not being rude. They're simply showing that your presence there is also important, and they just want to say hello. Now, that's just one small example, but cultural nuances absolutely play a vital role in doing business in Africa. You've got to make sure that you understand what the local business environment wants. As an example, how do you treat your employees? Do they like to be involved at a personal level? Do they want to keep it strictly professional? How do business partners like to be treated? What sort of importance do you attach to ranks, hierarchies, etc.? So all of this absolutely play a role as you navigate across Africa. Typically what we find is companies who enter Africa tend to treat Africa as a single country, and what they eventually find out is sub-Saharan Africa is 51 fairly diverse markets and countries.
That's always the misconception, isn't it? But lastly, Sumesh, what sort of advice would you give to companies that would like to invest in cross-border activities?
I mean, absolutely. Our study show that if you operate at a domestic level, there are about 13% chances that you would be among the high-performing SMEs. But if you operate at 2 or more countries cross-border, there's a 33% chance that you could be a high-performing SME. So there's a clear link between being a high-performance SME and ensuring you're doing cross-border activities, international business expansion, etc. While doing that in Africa, our tips, absolutely, one, do your research, do your homework, understand exactly what your business objective is, why do you want to expand into the market, what do you hope to achieve in 1 to 5 years from now. Second, understand local regulations, legal frameworks, taxation policies, understand exactly what you're getting into. Third, understand if you know or feel comfortable enough with the market to go in alone, or would you prefer to go in with a partner. Some countries have legal requirements that you go in with a partner or a joint venture, so understand that. Understand what sort of flexibility or arm power your partner is going to have in that country. Then fourthly, understand the market, understand the consumers, understand how they want to be communicated to. Consumers in East Africa want to be communicated differently to consumers in West Africa, to consumers in South Africa. And lastly, Africa is not for the faint-hearted, and you got to make some sacrifices. You got to make sure that you're in there for the long run. We've seen companies fail time and again when they don't see a return in a year or two, and then they get frustrated and they say, this country is not for me. You got to be in there for the long run, and you got to make sure that you persevere, and you will get the results. We've been here since 1978, and we are standing testimony to that.
Sumesh, thank you so much for your time.